You will have heard about the embouchure, but you might not have thought about the aperture. The aperture is the gap between your lips while you play. We learned that we need to squeeze our lips together when we play, and that is true, but are they actually touching? Have a look at this. It might feel like they're touching, but how would the air get out if they were? In the video you see that they're not even close to touching, and that's just at a mezzo forte, kind of middle of the range kind of note. The lips should just be flapping in the wind. That's how I think about it. If we think too much about squeezing our lips together, we end up ruining the shape of the air that we talked about earlier, and thus making the start of the notes unclear and erratic, and the sound throughout the note less than good. The pitch of our sound is partially decided by the hardness of our lips. The harder they are, the higher the pitch. That's why we need to tighten our lips in order to play. But the lips themselves should always be squeezing against a lovely cushion of air, not squeezing against each other. The hardness of your lips, and thus your pitch, is not only decided by how tight you squeeze your embouchure. It's also decided by the air. Because the harder you make your lips, the harder your air has to become in return to keep the aperture open. Hard air doesn't really make sense, but hard air is exactly the same as saying fast air. So the tighter you squeeze, the faster the air has to go. And this is where the size of your aperture comes into it. The smaller a gap is, the quicker the air has to travel to get through it, but there must always be a gap. Remember the shape of the notes we were talking about before, rather the shape of the air. I would like you to try this. You start with the square air, and then you slowly bring your lips in to create a buzz. You will find that the note starts before the lips touch. And that's how it should always be. And when you become proficient at this, then try and shorten the airspace before the note until it disappears completely. Like before, you should try this on every note you know, on every scale, and in every piece that you play. Here, we also use an important principle from before, which is that once the note has started, nothing changes. We have already found our ideal, so we don't need to change anymore. If you get a bad note, don't try and save it. Just stop and try again. When you get a good note, remember the shape of the air and also the shape of your aperture, the gap, length, everything. That way, you will slowly teach yourself the exact air and exact aperture you need for every kind of note.